The dust devil swirled past Josephine Zimmerman's boots, carrying with it the last remnants of topsoil from what had once been her family's thriving cattle ranch. And she knew with absolute certainty that tomorrow she would have nothing left to feed the 3 remaining head of livestock that represented her entire world. The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on Apache Junction, turning the earth to powder and the sky to brass, and Josephine stood at the edge of what used to be a creek bed, staring at cracked mud that mocked her with memories of rushing water. She was 23 years old, alone in this unforgiving land, and the drought had stripped away everything her father had built over 30 years. Her father had died 6 months ago, struck down by a fever that the town doctor said came from drinking contaminated water. Her mother had passed 3 years before that, and her younger brother had left for California before the drought truly set in, sending one letter that arrived 4 months ago promising he would send money soon. That money never came. Now Josephine stood on land that legally belonged to her, but might as well have been the surface of the moon for all the good it did her. The cattle were skeletal. The barn was missing half its roof from a windstorm 2 weeks prior, and the well had run completely dry yesterday morning. She had spent the morning walking to town, 5 miles under that brutal sun, to inquire about selling the land. The men at the land office had looked at her with something between pity and contempt. One had offered her $20 for the whole 160 acres. Another had suggested she might find more profitable employment at the saloon. She had walked out without another word, her pride the only thing she had left that was still intact. The walk back had been worse. The heat rose in shimmering waves from the hard, packed road, and she had finished the last of her water an hour into the journey. Her lips were cracked, her skin burned despite the wide-brimmed hat she wore, and her legs trembled with each step. She was perhaps a mile from her property when she saw the rider approaching from the opposite direction. He sat tall in the saddle, a man with broad shoulders and a weathered face that spoke of years under the sun. His horse was a magnificent roan, well fed and clearly cared for, which told Josephine immediately that this man had resources she could only dream of. As he drew closer, she could make out dark hair beneath his hat and eyes that were a startling shade of blue-green, like water, which seemed almost cruel given her current circumstances. The rider slowed as he approached, then stopped his horse entirely a few feet from where she stood swaying slightly in the road. He studied her for a long moment, and she forced herself to meet his gaze despite her exhaustion. "Madam," he said, his voice a low drawl that marked him as someone who had spent considerable time in Texas before coming to Arizona. "You look about ready to collapse. When did you last have water?" "I am fine," Josephine said, hearing how her voice cracked on the words. "My property is just up ahead." "The old Zimmerman place?" the man asked, and something in his tone made her defensive. "It is my place now," she said. "My father passed, and the land is mine." The man nodded slowly, then reached for one of the canteens hanging from his saddle. He held it out to her. "Drink. You will not make it another mile in this condition." Pride warred with desperate thirst, and thirst won. Josephine took the canteen with shaking hands and drank deeply. The water was warm but tasted like salvation. She forced herself to stop after several long swallows and tried to hand it back. "Keep drinking," the man said. "I have another and my well still runs strong." "Your well?" Josephine looked at him more carefully. "Which property is yours, Vincent Reeves?" he said, touching the brim of his hat. "I own the R Ranch, about 3 miles northwest of your land. We share a property line on the western side." Josephine had heard of the R. It was one of the few ranches in the area that seemed to be surviving the drought. She had never met the owner, though her father had mentioned him a few times, always with a tone of respect. "I should not take your water," she said, but she did not hand the canteen back. "I am offering it," Vincent said simply. "Drink your fill, and then I will ride with you back to your place. You should not be out in this heat alone." "I have been managing alone for months," Josephine said, but she drank again anyway. The water seemed to bring her back to life, clearing the fog from her mind and steadying her legs. "Managing is not the same as thriving," Vincent observed. "How long has your well been dry?" She saw no point in lying. "Since yesterday morning. The cattle are dying. I went to town to see about selling, but the offers were insulting." Vincent's jaw tightened. "Let me guess. Jim Crawford offered you $20 and suggested you might be better suited to other work. You know him, then?" "I know his type," Vincent said with clear distaste. "He has been buying up properties from desperate people for years, paying a fraction of what they are worth, then selling them to investors back east for 10 times what he paid. It is legal, but it is not right." Josephine handed the canteen back, having drunk nearly half of it. "Whether it is right or not hardly matters. I need money and he has it." "Do not sell to him," Vincent said firmly. "There are better options." "Such as?" Josephine heard the bitterness in her own voice. "I have no water, no feed for my cattle, and no prospects. What options do I have?" Vincent was quiet for a long moment, his eyes studying her face with an intensity that made her want to look away. Finally, he said, "I have water. I have grazing land, and I could use help managing my property. My foreman left last month to go back to his family in Colorado, and I have been trying to handle everything myself." "I do not need charity," Josephine said immediately. "It is not charity," Vincent replied. "It is a business arrangement. You need resources. I need labor. More than that, I know that once this drought breaks, and it will break eventually, land is going to be valuable again. Your property has good bones. Your father was a smart man who chose well. You knew my father. We spoke a few times at the general store, at the church on Sundays. He was a good man. He spoke of you with great pride." Vincent shifted in his saddle. "Here is what I propose. You bring your cattle to my land. I will provide water and what grazing we can manage. You help me with the work on my ranch. In exchange, I will give you half of whatever profits we make, and when the drought breaks, you will still have your land and healthy cattle to stock it with." Josephine stared at him. "Why would you offer this? You do not know me." "I know you walked 10 miles in killing heat rather than accept an insulting offer for your family's legacy," Vincent said. "I know your father was an honest man who kept his word, and I am willing to bet you are the same. And honestly, madam, I could use someone else who understands this land and this life. Most of the hands I could hire are drifters who will leave the moment something better comes along." It was too generous. It had to be. Men did not simply offer half their resources to strangers. "What is the catch?" Josephine asked bluntly. "No catch," Vincent said, "except that the work will be hard, the hours will be long, and I cannot promise success. This drought is killing everyone. I am surviving better than most because I have a deeper well and better water rights, but that does not mean I am thriving. We would be partners in struggle, Miss Zimmerman. It seems like I would be getting far more out of this arrangement than you." "Then work hard enough to make it even," Vincent said with a slight smile, the first she had seen from him. It transformed his face, making him look younger and far less severe. "What do you say?" Josephine looked down the road toward her property, then back at Vincent Reeves. Every instinct told her to be suspicious, to refuse, to maintain her independence. But those same instincts had not kept her cattle from dying or her well from running dry. Pride would not sustain her through another month of this heat. "I will agree on one condition," she said finally. "This is a business arrangement, as you said. I will not be beholden to you beyond the terms we agree upon. I am a partner, not a dependent." "Agreed," Vincent said immediately. He dismounted and held out his hand. "Partners." Josephine shook his hand, feeling the calluses that marked him as a man who did his own labor. His grip was firm but not crushing, and he released her hand quickly with respect. "When do we start?" "Now, if you are willing," Vincent said. "Let us go to your property, assess what you have, and begin moving your cattle today if possible. The sooner they have water, the better chance they have of surviving." They walked together back to her property, with Vincent leading his horse rather than riding while she walked. It was a small courtesy, but one that Josephine noticed. When they reached her land, Vincent surveyed everything with a practiced eye. He examined her 3 remaining cattle, checked the dry well, and walked through the barn. "Your property has good potential," he said when he finished his inspection. "The well will come back when the rains return and your barn can be repaired. For now, let us focus on keeping those cattle alive. Can you ride?" "Yes," Josephine said. "My father taught me when I was young." "Good." "There is an old mare in your barn. Is she yours?" Josephine nodded. Bessie was 20 years old and had belonged to her mother. The horse was too old for heavy work, but she was steady and reliable. "She is gentle." "Saddle her up," Vincent said. "We will drive your cattle to my property together." "It is only 3 miles, but in this heat, we need to go slowly." It took an hour to prepare. Josephine saddled Bessie while Vincent checked the cattle once more, giving them water from his remaining canteen, which they drank desperately. Then they began the slow process of moving the cattle across the parched landscape toward the R Ranch. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon by the time they arrived at Vincent's property, and Josephine felt her breath catch at the sight. The R was not thriving exactly, but compared to her own land, it looked like paradise. There was actual grass in some of the pastures, though it was brown and sparse. The barn was solid and well maintained. And most miraculously, there was a working windmill turning slowly in the breeze, pumping water into a large trough where several dozen cattle gathered. "The well goes down 150 feet, Vincent explained as they guided her cattle toward the water. "It cost a fortune to dig that deep, but my father insisted when he first claimed this land. He said water was the only thing that truly mattered out here, and he was right." Josephine watched as her 3 skeletal cattle pushed their way to the trough and began drinking. They drank for a long time, and she felt emotion tightening her throat. These animals had been with her family for years. Seeing them finally get what they desperately needed brought tears to her eyes, though she blinked them back quickly. "They will recover," Vincent said quietly, having noticed her reaction. "It will take time, but they will recover." "Thank you," Josephine managed. "Truly, Mr. Reeves, thank you." "Vincent," he corrected gently. "If we are to be partners, we should use given names." "And you are welcome, Josephine. May I call you Josephine?" "Yes," she said, "though most people call me Josie." "Josie," he repeated as if testing the name. "That suits you." He showed her around the property as the sun sank lower. The ranch house was modest but well built, with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a sitting area. There was a smaller cabin about 50 yards from the main house, which Vincent explained had belonged to his former foreman. "You can stay there," he said. "It has a bed, a stove, and a table. It is not fancy, but it is solid." "It is more than sufficient," Josie said, looking at the cabin with something approaching relief. She had been half afraid he would expect some other arrangement, but he was clearly offering her independent lodging. Vincent seemed to read her thoughts. "I meant what I said about this being a business arrangement. You will have your own space, your own privacy. We will work together, take meals together for efficiency's sake, but otherwise you are free to live as you choose." That night, after settling the cattle and showing Josie where everything was stored, Vincent prepared a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and dried beef. They ate at the table in his house, the conversation awkward at first as two strangers tried to find common ground. "How long have you been running the Triple R alone?" Josie asked. "My father died 2 years ago," Vincent said. "I had a foreman helping until last month, and I usually have 2 or 3 ranch hands, but they all left when the drought got worse. Could not pay them enough to stay." "I am sorry about your father." "And I am sorry about yours," Vincent replied. "It is hard, losing the people who built everything we have." "It is harder trying to maintain what they built," Josie said quietly. "I feel like I failed him." Vincent looked at her seriously across the table. "You did not fail. You are here still fighting. That is what matters." They talked late into the evening, sharing stories of their families, their struggles with the drought, their hopes for the future. Josie learned that Vincent was 28 years old, had never married because he had been too focused on building up the ranch, and had a dry sense of humor that surprised her. Vincent learned that Josie had taught herself to read from her mother's books, could shoot better than most men, and had a stubborn streak that he found oddly charming. When Josie finally walked across the yard to her new cabin, she felt something she had not experienced in months: hope. It was fragile and tentative, but it was there. The next morning began before dawn. Vincent knocked on her cabin door just as the sky was beginning to lighten, and together they began the work of managing the ranch. There was so much to do. The cattle needed to be checked, the water trough needed to be cleaned, fences needed mending, and 100 other small tasks required attention. Josie worked with a determination that impressed Vincent. She did not complain about the heat or the difficulty of the labor. When he showed her how he wanted something done, she learned quickly and remembered for the next time. By midday, they were both covered in dust and sweat, but they had accomplished more than Vincent had managed alone in the previous week. They fell into a routine over the following days. Up before dawn, work until the heat became truly dangerous around midday, rest for a few hours in the shade, then work again in the evening until dark. They took meals together, with both of them contributing to the cooking. Josie proved to be better at making bread, while Vincent had a talent for coaxing flavor out of limited ingredients. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, they began to know each other. Vincent learned that Josie hummed while she worked, old hymns her mother had taught her. Josie discovered that Vincent talked to the cattle like they were people, giving them names and personalities. They learned to work in sync, anticipating what the other would need before words were necessary. 3 weeks after Josie arrived at the Triple R, a storm threatened on the horizon. The sky turned dark and ominous, and the wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain. Vincent and Josie worked frantically to secure everything before the storm hit, bringing the cattle into the barn, closing shutters, and making sure nothing could blow away. The rain, when it finally came, was violent and brief. It hammered the roof of the barn where they had taken shelter, so loud they had to shout to be heard. But it ended after less than an hour, leaving only enough moisture to settle the dust temporarily. The drought continued. "I thought for sure that would break it," Josie said, standing in the barn doorway and looking out at the still dry land. "Someday it will," Vincent said from behind her. "We just have to last until then." She turned to look at him, suddenly aware of how close he was standing. In the dim light of the barn, his eyes looked more green than blue, and there was something in his expression that made her heart beat faster. "Why did you really help me?" she asked quietly. "The truth this time." Vincent was silent for a long moment. "Because I saw you standing in that road, ready to collapse but too proud to show weakness, and I thought you were the bravest person I had ever seen. Because my father taught me that good people help each other, especially in hard times. And because I was lonely, Josie, and I hoped that maybe you were too. I was, she admitted. I am. Are you less lonely now? Vincent asked. Yes, Josie said. Are you? Much less, he replied, and there was warmth in his voice that made something flutter in her chest. They stood there for a long moment, neither quite willing to break the connection, until one of the cattle lowed from deeper in the barn and the spell was broken. They went back to work, but something had shifted between them. Some barrier had come down. Over the next several weeks, their partnership deepened into friendship, and friendship began to shade into something more. Vincent started finding excuses to stand close to her while they worked, to let their hands brush when passing tools. Josie caught herself watching him when she thought he was not looking, admiring the way he moved, the strength in his shoulders, the gentleness in his hands when he handled the animals. One evening, after a particularly long day of mending fence line, they sat on the porch of the main house watching the sunset. The sky was ablaze with orange and red, and the heat was finally beginning to fade. I have been thinking, Vincent said carefully, about the future. About what happens when the drought breaks and your land becomes viable again. Josie felt her stomach tighten. She had been trying not to think about that, about the day when she would need to leave this place and return to her own property. What about it? I do not want you to leave, Vincent said bluntly. I know that is not part of our agreement, and I know you value your independence, but I need you to know that I do not want this to be temporary. What are you saying? Josie asked, her heart pounding. Vincent turned to face her fully. I am saying that somewhere in the last 2 months, you stopped being my business partner and became the person I most want to see every morning. You became the reason I look forward to each day, even when the work is hard and the future is uncertain. I am saying that I have feelings for you, Josie, and I needed you to know that. Josie stared at him, a dozen emotions warring inside her. She thought of her independence, the promises she had made to herself about not being beholden to any man. But she also thought of how she felt when Vincent smiled at her, how safe she felt working beside him, how right it seemed to share meals and conversation, and the companionable silence of two people who understood each other. I feel the same way, she finally said, the words coming out in a rush. I've been trying not to because this was supposed to be business, but I do. I feel the same way. Vincent reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and took her hand. So what do we do about it? I do not know, Josie admitted. I have never been good at this sort of thing. Neither have I, Vincent said with a slight smile, but maybe we could figure it out together. We have gotten pretty good at that. Josie laughed, the sound surprising her. We have we not, the best team in Apache Junction, Vincent agreed. He squeezed her hand gently. I am not asking you to make any decisions right now. I just needed you to know how I feel. The rest we can figure out as we go. That sounds reasonable, Josie said, and she squeezed his hand back. From that evening on, their relationship changed again. They were still partners in work, but now there was an acknowledgement of something deeper. Vincent began ending their days together on the porch, talking about everything and nothing. Josie found herself sharing dreams and fears she had never spoken aloud to anyone. They talked about their childhoods, their lost families, their hopes for what life might be like when the drought finally ended. 4 months after Josie had arrived at the RRR, autumn arrived, bringing slightly cooler temperatures but still no meaningful rain. They traveled together to town for supplies, and Josie noticed how Vincent stayed close to her, how his jaw tightened when other men looked at her, how he introduced her as his partner with clear pride in his voice. At the general store, they encountered Jim Crawford, the land agent who had insulted Josie months before. He looked at her with surprise. "Miss Zimmerman, I thought you would have sold by now and moved on." "I found a better option," Josie said coolly. Crawford looked between her and Vincent, and his expression turned calculating. "Reeves, I did not know you two were acquainted." "We are partners," Vincent said firmly. "And before you ask, no, I am not interested in selling either." "Shame," Crawford said. "I have investors who would pay very well for combined properties. Could set you both up comfortably elsewhere." "We are comfortable where we are," Josie said. After Crawford left, Vincent turned to her. "He will keep trying, you know. Men like that do not give up easily." "Then we will keep refusing," Josie replied. "I am not giving up my land, and I am not leaving." Vincent smiled at her, the full, genuine smile she had come to treasure. "Good, because I would have fought to keep you here anyway." They loaded their supplies and headed back to the ranch, comfortable in each other's company. The work continued, hard and relentless, but somehow easier because they faced it together. Vincent taught Josie how to shoe a horse properly, and she taught him a better method for storing grain to keep it from spoiling. They learned each other's rhythms, preferences, and quirks. One evening in late October, as they sat on the porch after dinner, Vincent said, "I have been thinking about expanding the herd once we can afford it. There is a rancher up north who breeds good stock. After the drought breaks and we can sustain more cattle, I thought we might buy some breeding pairs." "We?" Josie asked, noting his word choice. "Well, yes," Vincent said, looking at her. "This is your ranch too now, Josie. Half of everything, remember. That includes half the decisions about our future. Our future." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. "Vincent," Josie said slowly, "what exactly are we doing here?" He turned to face her fully. "What do you want us to be doing?" "I want this to be real," Josie said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "Not just a business arrangement or a friendship. I want this to be real between us." "It has been real for me for months," Vincent said quietly. "I was just waiting for you to be ready to acknowledge it." "I am ready now," Josie said. "I am ready to admit that I love you, Vincent Reeves. I do not know when it happened exactly, but somewhere between the work and the worry and the endless dust, I fell in love with you." Vincent stood, pulling her up with him. "I love you too, Josie Zimmerman. I have for longer than I probably should admit." He cupped her face gently in his calloused hands. "I want to marry you if you will have me. I want to make this official, to build a life together, to face whatever comes next as husband and wife." "Yes," Josie breathed, and then his lips were on hers, gentle and sure and perfect. She kissed him back with all the emotion she had been holding inside for months, and when they finally broke apart, both were breathless. "I do not have a ring yet," Vincent said, looking slightly embarrassed. "I should have planned this better." "I do not need a ring," Josie said, laughing. "I just need you." "You will have one anyway," Vincent promised. "We will go to town next week and pick one out together, and we will talk to the preacher about a wedding." They married on a Saturday in early November, in the small church in Apache Junction with a handful of locals as witnesses. Josie wore a simple dress of pale blue that Vincent had insisted on buying for her, and Vincent wore a new shirt and his best vest. The preacher spoke about commitment and partnership, about facing life's challenges together, and when Vincent kissed his bride, there were tears in both their eyes. The drought continued, but somehow it mattered less now. They had each other, and that made everything bearable. They moved Josie's belongings from the cabin to the main house, and she took over the second bedroom, though she and Vincent both knew it was only for appearances. Within a week, she had quietly moved into his room, and they shared a bed as husband and wife. The physical intimacy was new for both of them, and they learned together with patience and tenderness. Vincent was gentle with her, always making sure she was comfortable and willing. Josie discovered a passionate side of herself she had not known existed. They talked and laughed and loved, building a marriage in the midst of hardship. Winter came, bringing cold nights and slightly more moisture, though still not enough to break the drought. Vincent and Josie worked on improving the ranch, fixing what they could with limited resources. They celebrated Christmas together, just the two of them, exchanging simple gifts. Vincent gave her a pair of leather work gloves he had commissioned from the saddler in town, perfectly fitted to her hands. Josie gave him a warm scarf she had knitted in secret during the evenings when he had fallen asleep early. January and February were hard months. 2 of the cattle died despite their best efforts, losses that hurt both financially and emotionally. But there were also victories. One of the cows gave birth to a healthy calf, the first new life on the ranch in over a year. They named him Lucky, and he became a symbol of hope. In March, something miraculous happened. The sky turned dark and the wind picked up, and this time the rain did not stop after an hour. It rained for 3 days straight, soaking the parched earth, filling the dry creek beds and bringing the landscape back to life. When it finally stopped, the world looked different, greener, softer. "It is over," Josie said, standing outside and watching water drip from the roof. "The drought is finally over." Vincent came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "It is, which means your land will be viable again soon. Your well should fill back up within a few weeks." "You want me to move back there?" Josie asked, turning in his arms to face him. "God, no," Vincent said immediately. "This is your home now, Josie. You are my wife. We belong together. But my land is still yours," Vincent said. "We will restore it together. Maybe build a small house there for when we eventually have children and need more space, or rent it out to another family trying to get their start. But this is our home, you and me, right here." Josie smiled up at him. "I like that idea, all of it." "Good," Vincent said and kissed her soundly. With the drought broken, life became easier in many ways but busier in others. The grass came back quickly, and they were able to expand the herd. They hired 2 ranch hands, young men from town who needed work, and the Triple R began to prosper again. Josie's cattle recovered their health, and her 3 cows each gave birth that spring, tripling her original herd. Together, Vincent and Josie worked to restore her family's property. They repaired the barn, fixed the fences, and cleared the brush from the fields. When her well filled with water again, Josie stood beside it and cried, thinking of her father and how proud he would have been to see his land coming back to life. "He would have liked you," she told Vincent as they rode back to the Triple R that evening. "I hope so," Vincent replied. "I wish I could have known him better, could have asked his permission properly before marrying you." "He would have said yes," Josie said with certainty. "He always wanted me to find someone who respected me as an equal, who saw me as a partner. That is exactly what you do." By summer, both properties were thriving. They had nearly 50 head of cattle between them, and the pastures were green and lush. Vincent and Josie worked from dawn to dusk, but it was satisfying work now, building something rather than just struggling to survive. One evening in late July, as they sat on their usual spot on the porch, Josie said, "I have some news." Vincent looked at her, noting the slight nervousness in her expression. "What kind of news?" "The good kind, I hope," Josie said. She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. "I am pregnant, Vincent. We are going to have a baby." Vincent stared at her for a long moment, and then his face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen. "A baby? Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be," Josie said. "I spoke to the doctor in town yesterday. He thinks the baby will come in late February or early March." Vincent pulled her into his arms, holding her close. This is the best news, the absolute best news. How are you feeling? Are you well? Should you be resting more?" Josie laughed at his sudden concern. "I am fine. I am healthy and strong, and this baby is going to be healthy and strong too, but I am glad you are happy." "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Vincent said. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "We are going to be parents, Josie. Can you believe it?" "Barely," she admitted. "But I am excited. Nervous, but excited." They spent the rest of the evening making plans, talking about what they would need to prepare, how they would manage the ranch work as Josie got further along. Vincent was attentive and protective, insisting she take on lighter tasks as the summer progressed. In September, Jim Crawford appeared at their property again, this time with a different offer. He wanted to buy the water rights to both properties, promising a substantial sum. Vincent and Josie refused immediately and without hesitation. Their water had saved them, and they would not sell it to a speculator, no matter how much money he offered. "You are making a mistake," Crawford warned. "Drought could come again any time." "Then we will face it again," Josie said firmly. "Together. As we face everything." As autumn turned to winter, Josie's pregnancy became more obvious. She continued to work, though she let Vincent take on the heavier tasks. The ranch hands they had hired proved reliable and trustworthy, which allowed them more flexibility. Vincent hovered over her constantly, making sure she was comfortable, bringing her water and food, worrying endlessly. "I am going to be fine," Josie told him repeatedly. "Women have babies all the time." "Not my wife," Vincent would reply. "Not carrying my child. That only happens once, and I am going to make sure everything is perfect." Christmas that year was special, filled with anticipation of the new life that would join them soon. They celebrated with their ranch hands, throwing a dinner that brought together several neighboring families who had also survived the drought. There was laughter and music, and a sense of community that had been missing during the worst of the hardship. In late February, as expected, Josie went into labor. Vincent rode frantically to town to fetch the doctor and the midwife, then paced outside the bedroom while Josie labored through the night. The sounds of her pain nearly drove him mad with worry, but when the dawn broke and the sharp cry of a newborn filled the house, he felt his heart nearly burst. The midwife came to the door. "You have a son, Mr. Reeves, a healthy boy, and your wife is doing very well." Vincent rushed into the room and found Josie propped up in bed, exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in soft cloth. "Vincent," she said softly, "come meet our son." He approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the infant in her arms. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was currently yawning, showing tiny pink gums. "He is perfect," Vincent breathed. "He is," Josie agreed. "I was thinking we could name him William after my father, William Reeves." "William," Vincent repeated, testing the name. "It is perfect. He is perfect." "You are perfect." He bent to kiss her forehead. "Thank you, Josie. Thank you for our son, for our life, for everything." "We built it together," Josie reminded him, shifting the baby so Vincent could hold him. "Every bit of it together." Vincent took his son carefully, marveling at how small and fragile he felt. "Welcome to the Triple R, William. You are going to love it here." The months that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and constant learning. William was a healthy baby with strong lungs and a hearty appetite. Josie managed the demands of new motherhood with the same determination she applied to everything else, and Vincent proved to be a devoted father, often walking the floor with William in the middle of the night to give Josie a chance to rest. Spring came again, bringing new growth and new calves. The ranch continued to prosper. By William's first birthday, they had expanded their herd to nearly 70 head, and they had been able to lease Josie's family property to a young couple who reminded them of themselves, struggling but determined. On a warm evening in May, when William was just over a year old, Vincent and Josie sat on their porch as they had so many times before. William was toddling around the yard, chasing after a patient barn cat, and Josie had her head resting on Vincent's shoulder. "Do you remember that day I met you on the road?" Josie asked. "When I was ready to collapse and too proud to admit it." "I remember," Vincent said. "I thought you were going to refuse my water out of sheer stubbornness." "I almost did," Josie admitted with a laugh. "And then I would have collapsed, and who knows what would have happened." "I would have gotten you water anyway," Vincent said. "Stubbornness or not, I was not going to leave you there." "Why not, though?" Josie asked. "Really? You had no reason to help me. You did not know me. You did not owe my family anything. Why did you stop?" Vincent was quiet for a moment, watching their son play. "Because I saw in you the same thing I felt in myself, that refusal to give up, even when everything seems impossible. That determination to hold on to what matters, no matter the cost. And I thought that anyone who fought that hard deserved a chance." "You gave me so much more than a chance," Josie said softly. "You gave me water when I had none. You gave me land when mine was worthless. You gave me hope when I had lost it. And then you gave me love and a family and a future I never dared to dream of." "You gave me all those things too," Vincent replied. "I was surviving before you came, but I was not truly living. You taught me the difference." Josie turned to kiss him, slow and sweet. "I love you, Vincent Reeves." "I love you too, Josie Reeves." William toddled over, grabbing onto his father's leg and babbling something incomprehensible but clearly important. Vincent scooped him up, settling him between himself and Josie. "This," Vincent said, looking at his wife and son, "this is everything I ever wanted and more than I ever hoped for." "For me too," Josie said. "For me too." 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter whom they named Margaret after Vincent's mother. She had Josie's fierce spirit and Vincent's calm temperament, and she and William were constant companions from the moment she could follow him around. The ranch continued to grow, becoming one of the most successful in the region. Jim Crawford eventually gave up trying to buy their properties and moved on to easier targets. The young couple leasing Josie's family land worked hard and eventually bought it from her at a fair price, using the money they had saved over 3 years of good harvests. Josie and Vincent used that money to buy additional land adjacent to the Triple R, expanding their operation further. As their children grew, Vincent and Josie made sure to teach them the lessons they had learned. They taught them about resilience and determination, about the importance of helping others, about the value of water and land and hard work. They told them stories of the drought, of how their mother had walked 10 miles in killing heat, of how their father had offered half of everything he had to a stranger. "Why did you do it, Papa?" William asked when he was 8 years old, curious about everything. "Why did you share with Mama when you did not have to?" Vincent looked at Josie across the dinner table, and they shared a smile full of history and love. "Because some things are more important than holding on to everything for yourself," he said. "Because your mother needed help and I had the means to help her. And because sometimes when you take a chance on someone, you get back far more than you ever gave." "Did you know you would fall in love?" Margaret asked, romantic even at age 6. "No," Josie said honestly. "That was not part of the plan at all. But sometimes the best things in life are the ones you never planned for." "Like us?" William asked. "Exactly like you," Vincent said, ruffling his son's hair. "The best surprises." By the time William was 15 and Margaret was 13, the Triple R had become one of the most respected ranches in Arizona. Vincent and Josie had built something lasting, something that would carry on for generations. They employed a dozen ranch hands, ran over 200 head of cattle, and had breeding stock that ranchers came from 3 states away to purchase. But despite all their success, their favorite time was still the evenings on the porch. Sometimes their children joined them, sometimes they were alone, but always they were together. They would sit and watch the sun set over the land they had fought so hard to keep, and they would remember. You ever think about what would have happened if you had sold to Crawford that day? Vincent asked one evening when they were alone. Sometimes, Josie admitted, but not often. Because I cannot imagine any other life than this one. I cannot imagine not having you, not having our children, not having this ranch. This is my life, Vincent, the only one I want. Mine too, he said, taking her hand. I offered you half my water and land that day, but you gave me so much more in return. You gave me everything that matters. We gave it to each other, Josie corrected. Partners, remember? Partners, Vincent agreed, raising her hand to kiss it. In everything, always. As the years continued to pass, their children grew into capable adults. William married a schoolteacher from town, a smart woman named Sarah, who reminded Josie of herself in her determination and independence. Margaret married a neighboring rancher's son, a good man named Thomas who treated her with respect and love. Both couples built homes on the expanded Triple R property, and the ranch became a true family operation. Vincent and Josie eventually stepped back from the daily operations of the ranch, leaving the hard physical labor to their children and grandchildren. They remained involved in the major decisions, but mostly they enjoyed the fruits of their decades of hard work. They traveled occasionally, visiting San Francisco and Denver, but they always returned to the Triple R, to the land that had brought them together and sustained them through so much. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their entire family gathered for a celebration. There were children and grandchildren everywhere, the house full of noise and laughter and love. That evening, after everyone else had gone to bed, Vincent and Josie sat on their porch one more time. 30 years, Josie said wonderingly. It does not feel that long. It feels like forever and also like yesterday, all at once, Vincent replied. He looked at her in the moonlight, seeing the lines the years had carved around her eyes and mouth, the gray that had threaded through her hair. She was still the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. I would do it all again, you know. Every hard moment, every struggle, every challenge. I would do it all exactly the same if it meant ending up here with you. Even the drought, Josie asked. Even watching everything you built nearly die, even that, Vincent said firmly. Because that drought brought you to me. Without it, you never would have been on that road that day, desperate enough to accept help from a stranger. We might never have met at all. Then I suppose I should be grateful for it, Josie said, though I am also grateful it ended. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of the night. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. The windmill creaked softly as it turned. Inside the house, one of their grandchildren laughed in their sleep. You think we did right by them? Josie asked. Our children, I mean. Did we teach them what they needed to know? They are good people, Vincent said. They work hard, they treat others with respect, and they understand the value of what they have. What more could we ask for? Nothing, Josie admitted. I just want them to be happy. They are, Vincent assured her. Look at our family, Josie. Look at what we built, not just the ranch, but the people. 3 generations now, all thriving. We did that. You and me together. Josie leaned against him, feeling the steady beating of his heart. I love you, Vincent. Just as much as I did the day we married. More, even. I love you too, Vincent said, wrapping his arm around her. More than words can say. They sat there until the stars wheeled overhead and the moon began its descent toward the western horizon. Finally, Vincent stood and helped Josie to her feet. "Come on, Mrs. Reeves, let us go to bed." "In a moment," Josie said. She turned to look out over the ranch one more time, taking in the sight of the barn and the pastures, the windmill and the cattle, the homes where her children and grandchildren slept. "I just want to remember this, all of it. It will still be here tomorrow," Vincent reminded her gently. "I know," Josie said, "but I never want to take it for granted, not after everything it took to get here." Vincent understood. He never took any of it for granted either. Every morning he woke grateful for another day with his wife on their land, surrounded by family. Every evening he counted his blessings and found them too numerous to name. They went inside together, to the bedroom they had shared for 3 decades, and they held each other close as they drifted off to sleep. Outside, the ranch settled into nighttime quiet, and the stars shone down on the land that had tested them, shaped them, and ultimately given them everything they ever needed. Years continued to pass, bringing both joy and sorrow. Vincent's health began to decline when he was in his 60s, his joints growing stiff and his breathing sometimes labored. Josie cared for him with the same determination she had brought to every challenge in her life, making sure he rested, took his medicine, and did not overdo the work. He grumbled about being treated like an invalid, but she could see the gratitude in his eyes. "You are supposed to let me take care of you," he complained one afternoon when she insisted he stay inside rather than help with the branding. "You did take care of me," Josie reminded him. "For 35 years you have taken care of me. Now it is my turn." "I do not like it," Vincent muttered. "I did not like being helpless either," Josie said. "But you helped me anyway, so now you are going to sit here and let me help you." He did, because he loved her and because he understood that she needed to do this for him. They spent long afternoons on the porch, watching their family work the ranch, telling stories to their grandchildren, and simply being together. Vincent recovered somewhat, regaining some of his strength, though he was never again the vigorous man he had been in his youth. But that was all right. They had built something that would last beyond them, and they could rest in that knowledge. On a warm spring evening, much like the one when they had first met, Vincent and Josie sat on their porch and watched the sun set. They were both in their 70s now, their faces weathered by decades of sun and wind, their hands gnarled from years of work. But when Vincent took Josie's hand, the gesture was as tender as it had been when they were young. "Do you have any regrets?" Vincent asked suddenly. Josie thought about it seriously before answering. "None, not a single one. This life with you has been everything I could have wanted and more." "What about you?" "My only regret is that I did not meet you sooner," Vincent said, "that I did not have even more years with you." "We have had a good number of years," Josie said, "and we are not done yet." "No," Vincent agreed, "we are not done yet." They lived another 5 years together, 5 good years filled with family and love and the satisfaction of work well done. When Vincent finally passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, Josie held his hand and whispered her love to him one last time. She mourned him deeply, grieving the loss of her partner, her best friend, the love of her life. But she did not give up. That had never been her way. She continued living on the Triple R, surrounded by family, still offering advice and wisdom when asked. She told her grandchildren and great-grandchildren stories of their grandfather, of the drought, and the day he had offered her water and land, of how their love had grown from those desperate beginnings into something beautiful and lasting. Josie lived to be 84 years old, a matriarch presiding over a family that numbered in the dozens, a ranch that was known throughout Arizona as one of the finest and most well-run operations in the territory. When her time came, she passed away in the same bedroom where she had spent so many nights with Vincent, where her children had been born, where so many important conversations and tender moments had taken place. Her family buried her next to Vincent on a hill overlooking the ranch, under the shade of a cottonwood tree that they had planted together 40 years before. On her gravestone, they inscribed, Josephine Zimmerman Reeves' beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and partner, she never gave up on Vincent's gravestone. Beside hers, Vincent Reeves' beloved husband, father, grandfather, and partner, he shared everything the Triple R continued for generations after them, run by their descendants who had learned from their example. The story of how Vincent and Josie had met, how he had offered her half his water and land during the worst drought Arizona had ever seen, became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. And sometimes, on quiet spring evenings, when the breeze blew just right, and the sun set in brilliant colors over the pastures, those who knew the story swore they could still feel Vincent and Josie's presence on that porch, sitting together as they had for so many years, still partners in everything, still in love. The drought had taken everything she owned, but the cowboy who offered her half his water and land had given her something far more precious, a love that lasted a lifetime, a family that would carry on their legacy, and a home where she belonged. Together, they had turned desperation into hope, partnership into love, and struggle into triumph. Together, they had built something that would last forever. Their story became more than just family legend. It became part of the history of Apache Junction itself, told in the general store and the saloon, at church socials and town gatherings. When newcomers asked about the most successful ranches in the area, old-timers would always mention the Triple R, and they would tell the story of how it had been saved by two people who refused to give up, who chose partnership and love over desperation and defeat. The land they had fought so hard to preserve continued to thrive, generation after generation working the same pastures where Vincent and Josie had once struggled against the drought. The well that had saved them all still pumped strong, a testament to the foresight of Vincent's father and the careful stewardship of all who came after. And on the spot where Vincent had first offered Josie water on that dusty road so many years ago, the town eventually erected a small marker. It simply read, "Here in the darkest days of the great drought, two strangers met and changed each other's lives forever. May we all be so generous and so blessed." The marker became a landmark, a reminder to all who passed by that even in the hardest times, when it seems like there is nothing left to give, the simple act of sharing what you have can change everything. That kindness and partnership can turn into love. That two people working together can accomplish what neither could achieve alone. The story of Vincent and Josie Reeves endured because it was true, because it mattered, and because it spoke to something fundamental about the human spirit. They had faced impossible odds and won, not through luck or chance, but through determination, partnership, and love. They had built something lasting, not just in land and cattle and buildings, but in the family they created and the example they set. Their great-great-grandchildren still worked the Triple R Ranch, still told stories of the couple who had founded it, still lived by the principles of hard work, generosity, and partnership that Vincent and Josie had embodied. The ranch remained in the family, passed down through the generations with the stipulation that it would never be sold, that it would always remain a working ranch, that it would always honor the memory of the two people who had saved it with their courage and their love. And so the legacy continued, living proof that sometimes, in the darkest moments when everything seems lost, a simple act of kindness can be the beginning of something extraordinary. Vincent had offered Josie half his water and land, not knowing that she would give him everything in return: love, partnership, family, and a life richer than he could have ever imagined. They had started with nothing but desperation and determination, and they had built an empire of love that would last forever. And that, more than the land or the cattle or the wealth they accumulated, was their true legacy. They had proven that even in the harshest environment, love could not only survive but thrive. That partnership could overcome any obstacle. That two people who chose to face the world together could accomplish miracles. The story of Vincent and Josie Reeves was ultimately a story of hope, of resilience, of the transformative power of love. It was a reminder that the greatest gifts we can give each other are not material things, but rather our time, our trust, our partnership, and our hearts. Vincent had offered Josie half of what he had, and together, they had created something far greater than the sum of its parts. They had lived long, full lives, surrounded by love and family, working the land they cherished, building something that would endure long after they were gone. They had faced hardship and overcome it. They had found love in the most unlikely circumstances and nurtured it into something beautiful and lasting. They had been partners in every sense of the word, equals sharing both the burdens and the blessings of life. And when their time on earth was done, they left behind not just property and possessions, but a story that would inspire generations to come. A story that proved that kindness matters, that generosity is rewarded, that love conquers all. A story that showed that even when everything seems lost, hope remains, and sometimes all it takes is one person willing to share what they have to change everything. The Triple R Ranch stood as a monument to their love, their determination, and their unwavering partnership. And as long as it stood, the story of Vincent and Josie would continue to be told, a reminder to all who heard it that the greatest treasures in life are not things we own, but the people we love and the lives we build together.